Hello, it's Aryn. I don't post a lot on this channel at all, and I don't know how much I will be posting in the future, but I wanted to try my hand at a film review. And I have decided on doing one kind of interesting because it's not a film review of any film that would have come out theatrically. It's actually a review of a fan cut of Ahsoka, the Star Wars Ahsoka series by Kai Patterson. You might have heard of his cut of Obi-Wan because it got noticed by a lot of the major outlets. But this one, not to give away the whole game, but I think it might actually be improved on Obi-Wan in a couple of key areas. So I'll get into that in just a bit. So I wanted to start out with this. I have a bit of a connection with Kai Patterson. I initially got in contact with him by joining his Discord, and I seen that he needed a moderator, so I decided to throw my hat in the ring and kind of help out of there. I kind of stepped away from that role for a bit because of mental health reasons, and also because I was getting rather busy in my home life. So, but Kai has continued to be in contact with me, and he's great. Like, Kai is a wonderful human being, and I can't speak highly of him enough. But he actually reached out to me to ask if I would be able to help out, be like an extra set of eyes to try to like find technical issues and stuff. So it's like I didn't have like a massive impact on anything. I was just trying to find like audio pops or like frame stutters of the like. But I wanted you to know that I had seen a couple versions of this, which were essentially what has been released, minor little changes, some things that I gave him some feedback on that were changed, but very, very minor things. It was pretty much all done by the time I'd seen the first couple versions of it. But I wanted you to know that I had seen those, so that I might have like an inherent bias. I still think I can critique this fairly, and I'm going to go over what I think are some of the reasons why you might want to check this out as a way to experience the Ahsoka show. So, starting off with what I think a lot of people are going to be talking about the most with this one is the scene on Malachor, which is actually, I suggested Malachor as a setting for the fight with Anakin and Ahsoka, instead of, because his initial idea was to do Mustafar. And I said, Mustafar doesn't really make sense. And I threw out Malachor as a possible place, which he was very receptive to. But it's one thing for like someone like me to make like a suggestion that like, hey, maybe do Malachor. But Kai has to be the one to like execute on that. And it's not as easy as just like taking footage from Rebels, the Sith Temple on Rebels, which is where that scene happens originally. Because Rebels was like a very stylistic animated show, and Ahsoka is a little bit more visually grounded in the style of the films. So in order to make this work, he has to completely like make that from scratch. So he makes that whole set digitally in Blender, and then he can't just like, you're not just dragging and dropping the characters into it, like with, because the first version I seen, there were still some issues with like Anakin's hair. So I know just from seeing it just how like insane it is to like try to get like, because there's so many different strands on it. Like Ahsoka has like her their montrails are like smooth, so you don't have to do a whole lot. But with Anakin, he's got all these hairs, and Kai doesn't have the benefit of like the footage with like the green screen with like a clean plate. He has to completely do that on his own without any help from Disney. So just know how much like work was put into this. And like, even if like you're not super into this kind of stuff, like just know how much like work was put into it, and maybe you can appreciate it from that level. So then the other things that are like the biggest points of impact are like what he does with the editing to largely the beginning parts of the story. I think with taking out the whole plot point with gaining and losing the star map, it has sort of like a cascade on the rest of the film, because without that, like, it makes Sabine and Ahsoka, like, before it was just like for them to gain the star map and then lose the star map because they gave it to Sabine for some reason to study, is just, it makes all the characters seem dumb. And getting rid of like all of the bickering between them, like some of it's still there, but getting rid of like so much of it, just like it just dragged the whole thing down and just made everything weird between those two characters, and it's hard to get on board when you have stuff like that happening. So all of that's gotten rid of. So we don't have the scene where Ahsoka fights the HK droids, and we don't have the scene where Sabine fights Shin Hati for the first time, which consequently does, I think, lead to slightly weaker introductions for both of those characters. You know, we just see Ahsoka for the first time when she's going onto that security transport and the wake of what happens with, you know, Bayland and Shin breaking out Morgan. And then we see Sabine for the first time as she's watching Ezra's message to her before he left. So I personally would have kept the scene where we have the chase on Lothal. I know a lot of people didn't like that scene, but I think that that scene could have worked, edited a little bit differently. But originally there wasn't even going to be, like, we weren't going to see Sabine at all until like after seeing the message from Ezra. I'm glad that Kai like extended that a bit more. So we see her entering in where she's living now, and with the little Loth cat. I think something like that, even though it seems like it's very trivial, I think it's very important to have her sort of like established as her own person outside of like Ezra. Unfortunately, the writing for Sabine is largely just focused on Ezra, and I, as a woman, I'm not super happy when female characters are written with the sole purpose of like trying to support a male character. Not super into it, and that's not Kai's fault. That's how they decided to write Sabine for some reason. But anyway, getting rid of a star map, and even though like a lot of that does result in some weaker introductions for the characters, ultimately a better decision. Like, the editing overall is just better. A lot of the scenes could just like go on for like way too long. Like, it could be like this pensive sort of dour thing, and what's happened simply through the consequence of having to whittle it down to like a 3.5-hour film is a lot of stuff just has to go for like conciseness and time. But a lot of that stuff was just awkward. Like, there's just long scenes of dialogue and the dialogue wasn't that good, and I don't think the actors were able to deliver some of it believably. So getting rid of all that just overall improves the feeling of the film. And some of this requires using AI to kind of like help with the transition of scenes. And there's a lot of debate about the ethics of AI. And personally, I'm a little on the fence. Well, actually, no, I'm kind of anti-AI as it applies to, like, especially as it applies to art. But I'll defend it in this case because, number one, this is like a fan project, and I don't really think, we can, we can't reasonably expect Kai to be able to hire voice actors and not be able to monetize this, because like he can't monetize it because it's a fan project. Like, Disney would send a cease and desist. And even if he did get voice actors, like, it wouldn't be perfect. It would sound off, and it would take you out of it, and you could tell like it was like a fan thing. So there's that. There's also the fact that like it's not just AI. He performed any lines that were added into it. He performed. So like, and that's even with like Ahsoka and Sabine, which is kind of impressive. So he performed those lines and uses like an AI voice changer, and it's super seamless. The only one that it's like weirdly noticeable with is Hugh Yang. I don't know if it's because he was struggling with the accent, or I don't know, but there's something about it doesn't sound completely like David Tennant. He did nail the cadence, and there's actually a couple lines from Huyang that are like new to this version that are actually the highlights of the film. So even though I could tell that it wasn't David Tennant, there's some really funny lines from Huyang in this version that I think you're gonna enjoy. Also, like, there's a lot more visual effects. I think he said there's like something like 150 new visual effects shots, which is crazy how much like he decided to put into this. Um, like for instance, I've talked about Malachor, but there's also like just little things like where Sabine is training with a lightsaber, like Ezra's lightsaber, instead of the wooden sword, because earlier on she's like hesitant to use his lightsaber. But since we can't really spend a lot of time on that, we just have a scene where she is training with his lightsaber, so that when she pulls it out later, it's not like, oh, now she's using his lightsaber. So, like, before, but the first time I watched this, when I was just going through trying to find the technical issues, I didn't even, like, it was so seamless that I didn't even, like, catch it until I started going back to the show to scrub through the footage, and I'm like, oh, wait, he added her using the lightsaber. It looks super good. Like, his pedigree, like, Kai Patterson's pedigree is on full display. Like, he really knows his, like, visual effects work stuff. Like, and not a single shot in this, like, looks out of place. And then going back to Malachor once again, something's interesting, because when I suggested Malachor as a setting, I didn't even understand the impact it would have on this cut. Because, before it's like, well, they have a fight in the end because it's Star Wars and you punctuate a sequence in Star Wars with some action. That's just the way it works. But now, and it kind of left that whole sequence, like, where she's in the world between worlds, kind of feels a little bit, it just felt like fan service. Just like empty fan service, like member berry stuff. But now it actually has, like, a point. Like, it actually has a narrative purpose. And the Malachor part only lasts, like, a handful of seconds. But it's actually the thing that clicked into place for me what that whole scene even meant in the first place. Like, Anakin kicks her into the temple on Malachor. And he's now, so with this cut, he's forcing her to relive her worst memories of him. And now, what does she do? She chooses to, like Luke Skywalker before, she throws her lightsaber aside, whereas before, they fought to the death, essentially. If not for Ezra, she would have died there. But in this case, she throws the lightsaber aside and says, I choose to live. Now, I didn't fully understand what that would even mean until this, because it's like, well, she's choosing to live. Well, obviously, she should choose to live and not want to die. Like, that's the lesson. But that's not the lesson. The lesson is not you should want to live over dying. The lesson is, because earlier, Balin says to her, he says, it didn't have to be this way, but no other way. And then when she's in the world between worlds, she says to Anakin, what if I want to stop fighting? And then he says, well, then you'll die. And then she chooses to live, but it's not as if the lesson's not don't fight. The lesson is you can fight other than just whipping out a lightsaber. And this is kind of like followed up on when, like, she fights Balin again, and he says, you can't beat me. And she says, perhaps, but I don't have to. And then, she gets away, he's distracted with Huyang. So that, the point is made that, like, she can fight with something other than a lightsaber. And then I fully, like, it clicked. Like, that's what that scene meant. That scene actually does have purpose. Like, Anakin's, like, lesson is actually something that she applies later in the film now. Like, it didn't even make sense to me before, and now it does. And that's what I think Kai gets about these fan edits. It's not about, like, some people look at, like, fan edits like how they have to completely change what the movie is. Like, if the movie is not good, it's not good. No amount of editing is ever going to take, like, something that's absolute trash and turn it into something amazing. What you need to do is you need to know that, okay, so there's things about it that work, otherwise it's not worth doing. And what you're doing is just highlighting what works by getting rid of what doesn't. There's not a ton in here that like Kai Patterson just like adds whole cloth into it. Like most of what's in here is what was already in the show. He just takes out certain things that like muddied up the storytelling, and through subtraction there's addition. Like obviously there's things that he did that he added into here to make it, work more. But for the most part, what you see in Kai Patterson's cut of Ahsoka is what was already there. It's just now that it's been cut into this feature-length version, which I think is what Lucasfilm really needs to be focusing on instead of these shows, you actually see that there is value here. It's just, it's so drawn out, and with the application of like some color grading that actually like brings it more in line with the films. Like before it was so gray, and now there's actually like color here, there's life. This film actually feels like an adventure. It's not this dour contemplation of legacy and responsibility. It's a Star Wars adventure, and I was blown away by it. I've seen it like several times now. I saw it like twice when I was helping Kai. I've seen it several more times now that it's fully released, and I couldn't be more impressed. I know this is basically kind of turned into like a Glaze session for Kai, but like I don't have a ton negative to say about it. Like obviously the things that I don't like about it are still present, but overall what has been done to this version of Ahsoka has made it not more than just watchable. It's actually made it what I think is good. And I will be happy to watch it again if I ever feel like, watching this part of the story again. And then when I do, it's going to be watching it as Kai Patterson's cut of Ahsoka. I'm not going to go back to the show because there's really no need to. This is the way to watch it. That's my feeling on it anyway. And I hope y'all give it a look. If you want to check it out, like go to Kai Patterson's YouTube page, check out one of the trailers. He has like links there where you can go find that for yourself. Also, make sure that you have a subscription to Disney Plus before you do. Let's keep this all legal. But anyway, I hope y'all check it out, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this review. All right, y'all have a great one.